I'm going to give you a breakdown of the NFC Championship game between the Green Bay Packers and the San Francisco 49ers, and we're starting right now. What is going on? My name is Alpha Omega. Welcome to another video. Let's quickly go over what happened over the weekend. So in the divisional round, we all saw once again why the playoffs make champions and why once you're a playoff team and actually in the playoffs, anything can happen. The Ravens found that out firsthand as soon-to-be MVP Lamar Jackson and the Ravens got thoroughly dominated by the Tennessee Titans. There are a few stories to come out of this game, including Derrick Henry becoming the first NFL player in history to record 3 consecutive games with at least 180 rushing yards, and the Ravens cornerback Marlon Humphrey being quoted as saying the team's identity is to get in the playoffs and choke. Now that's saying something considering he's the one who got twisted and turned around and essentially had his ankles broken on a Titans passing touchdown to Khalif Raymond. Check it out right here.
A dime. Khalif Raymond is 5'8" and extremely fast. Great move there on Humphrey. Watch him.
So the number 1 seed Ravens are out and the Tennessee Titans are in. And in Santa Clara, the number 1 seed San Francisco 49ers pulverized the Vikings in all 3 phases of the game, in a game that showcased how good the 49er defense can actually be. Now, I put out a betting guide video on the Vikings 49ers games, which I'll put a link to at the top of the screen. Check it out and you'll see that just about everything that I said would happen did happen. And then on Sunday, the Texans got up 24-0 on the Chiefs, and everything looked to be going the Texans' way early on. But the Chiefs' defense and Patrick Mahomes proved that no lead is too big for that team, not only coming back to score 28 unanswered points to take the 28-24 lead going into halftime, but also held the Texans to only 7 more points the entire game. And the Chiefs became the first team to go from being down 20 or more points to winning the game by 20 or more points. Texans coach Bill O'Brien has never been a good coach in my opinion, and hopefully Houston finally cuts bait on this clown and finds a real coach. I wouldn't count on that though. Finally, the Seahawks traveled to Lambeau to take on the Packers, and while Russell Wilson led a furious comeback in the second half, the Seahawks defense really let down the team and were unable to stop Aaron Rodgers late in the game. And after a punt with a little over 2 minutes left, the Seahawks never got the ball back. I also wouldn't be giving proper credit if I didn't mention how well the Packers defense played against Seattle, causing 5 sacks, including the sack that forced Seattle to punt away its season. Also, Packers wide receiver Davante Adams had 8 receptions and 2 touchdowns, and also set a Packers franchise postseason record with 160 receiving yards. So now we have the championship round set as the Titans travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. And the topic of this video, the Packers travel to the Bay Area to take on the 49ers in the NFC Championship. I'm really excited for this game, which harkens back to a rivalry from my childhood with the Packers and 49ers going at it, which is why I chose to break down this game. And as a sports bettor, make no mistake, there is value betting on this game if you know how to find it. However, before we get into the breakdown between the Packers and the 49ers, take just a moment and click the link in the description, head over to my website and consider signing up for a sports pick package. If your goal is to grow a gambling bankroll and make money betting on sports, signing up with me and betting on the plays that I send you every day can go a long way to helping you achieve those goals. And while the NFL season is just about over and now college football is over with LSU beating Clemson, my college basketball season is rolling. I'm hitting at 60%, and with the number of games going on every week heading into March Madness, there will be quite a bit of action. Also, I'm going to try to shorten the length of these videos, because while I do enjoy the deep dive on individual games, the way that YouTube and the YouTube algorithm works, the more content that I put out, the more YouTube promotes my stuff. So I'm going to be tinkering with the balance between quality and quantity so that I'm still providing you with useful information to make your bets, but I'm also helping myself by putting out more content. Before I go further, if you like what I do here, and also if you enjoy independent content creators and content on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking and sharing this video. I get that that's a lot of work, but doing all that is how you and I grow this channel and stay competitive against the giant corporations and corporate sports channels that YouTube has decided to prioritize. Okay, let's get into the NFC Championship between the Packers and the 49ers. The Alpha Omega Vegas consensus line has the 49ers favored by 7 points, with the total sitting at 45. Implied odds mean based on the current moneyline odds, what is the projected implied probability of victory? Basically, it's the chances of victory expressed as a percentage. In this case, Vegas is saying the 49ers have a 78% probability of winning the game outright, with the Packers having a 26% chance of pulling off the upset. Using my base power rankings, I have the 49ers favored by 6 points with a total of 47. But remember, my base power rankings are only the starting point for your handicap and are not the final numbers I use to make my bets. If you're a Packer fan, after watching the 49er offense play against the Vikings, you have plenty to worry about, as the 49ers not only ran the ball incredibly well against the Vikings, but all-pro tight end George Kittle wasn't even needed to win the game. While Kittle made too many key blocks to count over the course of the game, Gorgeous George only had 3 receptions for 16 yards against the Vikings. Again, it's not that Kittle had a bad game, he played great. The 49ers just didn't need the receiving core in this game, and Coach Kyle Shanahan didn't want to reveal too much of the 49ers playbook, especially once it became obvious that the game was very obviously turning into a 49er victory. Having said that, don't forget that Kittle finished the regular season with 85 receptions for 1,053 yards and 5 touchdowns, and I expect Kittle to be a more important offensive factor against the Packers. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo played his usual game, efficient, quick passing, punctuated by the occasional complete misread of a defense. That cost Garoppolo in this game, throwing an interception right to linebacker Eric Kendricks. Thankfully for the 49ers, that Garoppolo miscue only cost the 49ers 3 points. But if Jimmy G makes those kind of mistakes against the Packers, Aaron Rodgers is not Kirk Cousins, and the Packers will turn turnovers into touchdowns. The 49er wide receivers played well, especially Deebo Samuel, who played physical football and pounded the Vikings defense when needed. San Francisco's wide receiving core characteristically dropped a couple passes, but played as well as was needed considering how amazing the 49er run game was. Running back Tevin Coleman was the third option for the 49ers the entire season, and frankly didn't have one solid rushing performance coming into the game against the Vikings. That all changed against Minnesota, as Coleman was a one-man wrecking crew against the Vikings, finishing with 105 yards and 2 touchdowns on 22 carries. Coleman had an amazing game, and the running back's performance demonstrated just how deep of a team the 49ers are. The keys for the 49er offense will be the offensive line handling the dominant pass rush of the Green Bay Packers, which will limit Garoppolo's potential for bad decision-making, the three-headed monster of Mostert, Breida, and Coleman continuing to punish teams and consistently gain yards on the ground, and the 49er receivers holding onto the football and fighting through the first hit for yards after catch. If the 49er offense accomplishes their team goals, San Francisco will cover the spread and win the game. Past Packers teams have had dominant offenses dragged down by sagging defenses, but this season has been a decidedly different Packer defense, with all of the last few off-seasons worth of moves finally coming to fruition as the high draft picks used on defensive players and the signing of free agent linebackers Za'Darius and Preston Smith, changing the Packer defense into a somewhat dominant unit, which has allowed defensive coordinator Mike Pettin to find a balance that has created pressure without the need for consistent blitzes. While it is important to point out that Russell Wilson and the Seahawks took advantage of a winded Packer defense in the second half, on what turned out to be the final Seahawks drive of the 2019-2020 season, Za'Darius Smith hurried Wilson on first down and Preston Smith sacked him on third down, which forced that fateful Seattle punt. The Packers put consistent pressure on Wilson throughout the game and racked up 5 total sacks on Wilson by the end of the game. While the front 7, including fellow linebacker Blake Martinez, catches with 10 tackles, played extremely well given the tough matchup against the elusive Wilson. The Packers' secondary, particularly Jair Alexander, is what forced Wilson into so many pressured throws and throws from outside the pocket. For much of the game, Wilson was able to scramble his way into time in the pocket, but more often than not, the Seahawks receiving core was well covered, and Wilson either had to force throws into extremely tight coverage or had to take off and run with it. The play of the Packers secondary is potentially the most important piece of the Packer defense to pay attention to headed into the matchup against the 49ers. The keys for the Packer defense will be finding ways to beat the 49er offensive line, forcing Garoppolo into hurried throws, which will eventually cause Jimmy G to make a bad decision. The entire Packer defense making good open field tackles, which will prevent the 49ers from gaining yards after the catch, and the Packers secondary blanketing the 49er receiving core, which will give the Green Bay pass rush the opportunity to get to the quarterback. If the Packer defense accomplishes their team goals, Green Bay will cover the spread and win the game. Before I continue with the betting guide, if you are enjoying the video and if you feel like you're getting good information that can help you gain an edge over the sportsbooks and make smarter sports wagers, make sure and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay updated with the latest sports betting content from me, professional sports handicapper Alpha Omega. Also, make sure and click the link in the description of the video, check out my website, and sign up for a sports betting package. I literally break down sports information and make my living based on that information every day. I take all of the sports data I can find, I factor all of that data into mathematical betting models to make my picks, and I send you the same picks that I bet on myself. I have packages for every level of sports bettor. From a beginner who is just coming into the sports betting world to the expert bettor who just needs that extra edge to take them to the next level. Make the smart decision and sign up with a professional today. Against the Minnesota Vikings, a now healthy 49er defense looked like the team that earlier this season held opponents to an average of less than 14 points per game. As much as it's important to point out how much of a team effort the victory against Minnesota was, Nick Bosa was undoubtedly the player of the game, racking up 6 tackles and 2 sacks and being involved in one way or another in most of the big plays of the game. Bosa was unbelievable, and all of the hype given to the soon-to-be Defensive Rookie of the Year is justified. As well, the return of star lineman Dee Ford was huge for the 49ers. Ford not only racked up a sack of his own, but was also involved in many of the pressures and hurried throws Cousins was forced to make. Linebacker Quan Alexander, the other San Francisco player who returned from injury, also came up huge against the Vikings, and as I predicted, the San Francisco defense just looked like a completely different team with both Ford and Alexander on the field. Also, as I predicted, the 49ers secondary played lights out against Minnesota, and Richard Sherman again shut up the haters as if he hadn't already, with another key interception that, while still early in the third quarter, set up the 49ers for another touchdown to go up 24-10. The only miscue by the 49ers was on the second Vikings drive, where San Francisco cornerback Akello Witherspoon got targeted on every pass play and was beat every time he was targeted, including a deep touchdown to Stephon Diggs. Witherspoon was benched after that mistake, and Coach Kyle Shanahan admitted to benching Witherspoon due to poor play. After Witherspoon was taken out, that was the end of the Vikings' success offensively. As well, it is important to mention that the Vikings' offense revolved around Dalvin Cook throughout the season, and the 49er defense made Cook a complete non-factor in the game. Cook is one of the best running backs in football, and the fact that the 49er defense was able to shut down Cook so effectively is important to consider against Packer running backs Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. The keys for the 49er defense will be the defensive line continuing to play at an elite level, which means bullying the Packer offensive line, putting consistent pressure on Aaron Rodgers, and forcing Rodgers to throw before routes have developed, the 49er front seven slowing down Aaron Jones in the Packer running game, which will force the Packers to become one-dimensional and over-reliant on the pass, and the 49er secondary, particularly Richard Sherman, slowing down number 1 receiver Davante Adams and the Packer receiving core. If the 49er defense accomplishes their team goals, San Francisco will cover the spread and win the game. The Packer offense has played timely football throughout the season and come up big when needed. While the wins haven't always been pretty, Green Bay went 13-3 in the regular season and comfortably scored 28 points against a tough Seattle team that is not easily beaten in clutch situations. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers played a great game against Seattle, and it was obvious from the opening possession that Rodgers had all phases of his game locked in, and it showed where he dropped multiple dimes into tight coverage. Rodgers made a few throws in this game that maybe only he could make, in stride, close to perfect passes. After being criticized prior to and at certain points during the season for not being the same quarterback, Rodgers had a vintage game against the Seahawks, and that is exactly what will be needed against the 49er defense, which is ranked at the top of the league the entire year. Especially now, considering the renewed health of San Francisco, the Packers will need Rodgers to bring his A game to have a chance in this game. As well, wide receiver Davante Adams played amazingly, and as already mentioned, Adams set a franchise record with 160 receiving yards, and Adams looked like the best receiver on the field for both teams. That type of dominance is what will be needed against the 49ers, and considering the matchup against Richard Sherman, the winner of that matchup may be a deciding factor in the outcome of the game. Tight end Jimmy Graham had one of his best games of the season against Seattle, and Graham's reliable hands will be utilized by Rodgers in a more expanded fashion against the 49ers. Graham getting separation and coming down with catches will be important for the Packer offense, and I expect Graham to rise to the occasion and be a factor for Aaron Rodgers and the Packer offense. While running back Jamal Williams was not as big of a factor against Seattle, fellow running back Aaron Jones played efficient football and came up with clutch runs when needed, finishing with 62 yards on 21 carries. While statistically this was not one of Jones's best games, it is important to remember that when needed, Jones got the yards. The keys for the Packer offense will be the Packers receivers breaking off explosive plays and winning their individual matchups, the Packer offensive line holding off the 49er pass rush, which will give receiver routes time to develop and Rodgers time to complete passes, and the Packer running back duo of Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones making their presence felt and impacting the game. If the Packer offense accomplishes their team goals, Green Bay will cover the spread and win the game. The margin of victory in this game will be determined by the 49er quarterback making smart decisions with the football and not causing turnovers, the Packer defense slowing down the 49er rushing attack, which will force the 49ers to pass the ball more frequently, giving the Packer defensive line and secondary opportunities to disrupt Jimmy G. The 49er defense putting pressure on Aaron Rodgers on every play, forcing the quarterback to throw the ball away and eventually force throws into coverage, giving the secondary the opportunity to intercept the ball, and the Packer offense making an impact on the ground, which will force the 49ers to honor the run, thereby opening up the pass. Whichever team accomplishes their team goals will cover the spread and win the game. Okay guys, that's the video. Let me know what you think. If you feel like you're gaining information that will help you in your sports betting, or if you have any questions, make sure and let me know in the comments. And if you like what you heard in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't like what you heard, thanks for sticking around this long. Also, remember to head over to my website and sign up for one of my sports packages. And remember, I have sports packages for every type of sports bettor. Whether you're an everyday bettor who wants that little extra edge to help you cash a few more winners, or you're just getting into sports betting and you want to find out how to make money betting on sports, make sure to click the link in the description of the video, head over to my website and sign up for a package now. And if you want to stay updated with all the latest sports betting guides across all major sports, start now by clicking the next video link right here and consider hitting the round subscribe icon so you don't miss anything. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.